Alright, sorry about that. I was eating and kind of fucked up everything and super late. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Vicious E versus America. And today we are going versus the SCP Foundation. Alrighty. I think we are. We should be. Alright, so without further ado, really I was going to just read some random SCPs. Ricky Ticky Taffy. It's okay, yo. Ricky Ticky Taffy. I don't know what that is. Some sort of... Did you just put a hex on me? Did you just curse me with voodoo propaganda? That was very nice. You shouldn't curse your internet buds. Alright. You know, I think I'll break you guys in to the SCP Foundation. Alright. Let me see. God, what do you call that when you're... Yeah, the training video. There's an SCP training video that kind of breaks down what they are. So that'll be the first thing we watch. My WikiLeaks video made you laugh? Yeah. It's kind of funny watching me fail at saying obfuscation. I'm a little better at it now. Not to toot my own horn. There we go.
ADAX, for the good of humanity.
I'm not as bald as Tim Pool, but I'm getting there. I keep forgetting to unmute this fucking mic. But yeah, there's my hair. It's been shared. I don't know if that's what you meant.
Hello. If you're watching this, then congratulations. You have been specially chosen to be a part of the most expansive secret organization in the history of mankind, the SCP Foundation. What is the SCP Foundation? We are an international covert agency tasked with the monitoring and containment of paranormal entities and anomalies. To put it bluntly, we protect you from the things you don't know about. With bases and research centers worldwide, and no government affiliation to limit our resources and regulations, we have limitless manpower and technology at our fingertips. SCP stands for Secure, Contain, Protect, and that is exactly what we do. The items, objects, creatures, and subjects we procure vary from the microscopic to larger than life, and everything in between. All of these entities fall on a spectrum of danger and or threat to humans, which are as follows. Object Class Safe. Safe class objects are those anomalies that are either sufficiently understood that they are now completely and reliably contained on a permanent basis, or otherwise do not trigger their anomalous effects unless intentionally activated. Classifying an anomaly as safe.
His hat is like Trump's hair. Yeah, that's hilarious.
However, does not mean that handling or activating it does not pose a threat. And personnel are to be reminded that all special containment procedures and safety protocols are to be observed at all times. Object Class Euclid. Euclid class objects are anomalies that are either insufficiently understood or inherently unpredictable, such that reliable containment is not always possible, but do not pose sufficient threat to qualify for Keter classification. The vast majority of anomalies cataloged and contained by the Foundation are initially classified as Euclid, until they are either sufficiently understood or exhibit sufficient danger to qualify for reclassification. In particular, any anomaly that exhibits autonomy, sentience, and or sapience is generally classified a Euclid class entity at minimum, due to the inherent unpredictability of an object that can act and think on its own. Object Class Keter. Keter class objects are anomalies that pose an inimical threat to the safety of Foundation personnel.
Yeah, before they get into Keter class, Keter SCPs, they're kind of hard to explain. They're not like, I don't think they're part of the government per se, but they might actually have more pull than the government. Basically, just kind of think of them like as the Men in Black, but for anomalies.
And the rest of mankind, and either require extensive complex procedures to contain, or cannot be fully contained by the Foundation's current technology and knowledge.
Yeah, we went over a few SCPs last time. This is a continuation of that.
These anomalies are generally considered the most dangerous ones in Foundation containment, and all research efforts are directed towards enabling more reliable containment of such anomalies, or, as a last resort, the timely neutralization or destruction of its anomalous effects. Object Class Neutralized. Neutralized anomalies are those that are no longer anomalous, either through having been intentionally or accidentally destroyed, disabled, or otherwise no longer function or exhibit anomalous effects. Object Class Explained. Explained anomalies are those that are completely and fully understood to the point where their effects are now explainable by mainstream science, have been debunked as a false or mistaken classification, or are so widespread and publicly disseminated such that containment is no longer possible. Object Class Thaumiel. Thaumiel class objects are... Now you're probably wondering where you fit into all of this. Well, wonder no more.
Yeah, they expunged the Thaumiel explanation. I know a little bit about Thaumiel classes. The Thaumiel SCPs are actually the SCPs that the Foundation actually utilize, and actually use those SCPs to capture more SCPs, or just for whatever. Like, for instance, they found this immortal like eel that's like the size of a continent, like at the bottom of the ocean. But if you get next to the eel, it makes you go crazy and you lose all your memories. And the SCP Foundation, after they I guess secured it, they found out that they could use like the eel's ooze or whatever, some secretions from it, to actually synthesize these concoctions that would actually give people amnesia. So they actually used that SCP to get rid of people's memories and shit. So you know how the MIB, they've got that pin that they flash in your eye and you forget what you saw. They just use like that eel's like ooze and shit, and that eel is technically a Thaumiel class. I think it's like SCP-3000 or some shit. I remember that. I don't know.
We will now explain our classification levels briefly. There are 5 class levels in the Foundation. They range A through E and are as follows. Class A personnel are those deemed essential to Foundation strategic operations, and are not allowed direct access to anomalies under any circumstances. When circumstances require Class A personnel to be in direct proximity to such anomalies, such as in the case of facilities housing containment units, Class A personnel are not allowed access to the areas of the facility containing such anomalies, and are to be kept in a secured area at all times. In the case of an emergency, Class A personnel are to be immediately evacuated to a designated and secure off-site location. O5 Council members are always Class A personnel.
Yeah, the O5 Council is basically like they're the head of the Foundation, to be blunt. O5, there's like 12 members of them. I don't know why they're called O5, but there's 12 of them. And they have access to most of the SCPs, and they boss everyone else around. So that they'd be A class.
Class B personnel are those deemed essential to local Foundation operations, and may only be granted access to objects, entities, and anomalies that have passed quarantine, and have been cleared of any potential mind-affecting effects or memetic agents. In the event of a containment breach or hostile action against the Foundation, Class B personnel are to be evacuated to a designated secure off-site location as soon as possible. Class C personnel are personnel with direct access to most anomalies not deemed strictly hostile or dangerous. Class C personnel that have had direct contact with potentially mind-affecting or memetic properties may be subject to mandatory quarantine and psychiatric evaluation as deemed necessary by security personnel. In the event of a containment breach or hostile action against a Foundation facility, non-combatant Class C personnel are to either report to secure lockdown areas or evacuated at the discretion of on-site security personnel. Class D personnel are expendable personnel used to handle extremely hazardous anomalies, and are not allowed to come into contact with Class A or Class B personnel. Class D personnel are typically drawn worldwide from the ranks of prison inmates convicted of violent crimes, especially those on death row. In times of duress, Protocol 12 may be enacted, which allows recruitment from other sources, such as political prisoners, refugee populations, and other civilian sources that can be transferred into Foundation custody under plausible, deniable circumstances. Class D personnel are to be given regular mandatory psychiatric evaluations and are to be administered an amnestic of at least Class B strength, or terminated at the end of the month at the discretion of on-site security or medical staff. In the event of a catastrophic site event, Class D personnel are to be terminated immediately, except as deemed necessary by on-site security personnel. Class E is a provisional classification applied to field agents and containment personnel that have been exposed to potentially dangerous effects during the course of securing and establishing initial containment over newly designated anomalous object, entity, or phenomenon. Class E personnel are to be quarantined as soon as
Indeed, my hat is from that ninja show, Naruto. This is actually the insignia of the Leaf Village. Naruto and pretty much everyone from that village wears this one. It's the Konoha village or the Leaf Village.
possible, monitored, and screened for potentially harmful changes in behavior, personality, or physiology, and may only return to duty after being fully debriefed and cleared by psychiatric and medical staff. Now, the biggest secret in the world wouldn't be a secret at all if it wasn't for the compartmentalization of information. But we'll save that for your next assignment briefing. In summary, SCPs are paranormal anomalies that either pose a threat to human life or represent an outlying factor within the known sciences not yet understood by humanity. Personnel classifications range from A to E in descending order from critical importance to expendable in droves.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Miller, and the SCP we're going to be looking at today is SCP-811. Object Class, Euclid.
Can you hear it?
Special Containment Procedures. SCP-811 should be kept in a climate-controlled cylindrical glass enclosure between 10 and 20 meters in diameter, filled to a depth of no less than 2.5 meters on average with wetland soil and stagnant fresh water. It is to be furnished with a variety of aquatic plants from its native swamp, as the remaining vegetation there has exhibited the adaptation to regrow quickly from injuries endured during contact with SCP-811 as long as the roots are undamaged. Logs of manageable size and additional humus-rich soil may be provided for good behavior. Water depth is not to exceed 0.5 meter at its lowest point. Height of the enclosure must be no less than 5 meters above the highest soil point. Temperature is to be kept at 25 degrees Celsius, and humidity should be kept above 70%. There is to be a decontamination airlock chamber between the door into the enclosure and the door to the rest of the facility. Air that is ventilated into the enclosure should not be recirculated back into the rest of the facility under any circumstances. The methane resulting from SCP-811's normal interaction with this environment is not anomalous and may be bottled for use as fuel. No heated elements or open flames are permitted inside the enclosure. The enclosure must be tested daily for pH and microbe levels in both the soil and water, as well as for changes in chemical composition. Enclosure should be cleaned bi-weekly, preferably by D-Class personnel. All discarded waste should be put in quarantine for analysis before disposal by standard biohazard protocol. The subject is to be given at least 5 kilograms of live food 24 hours after its completion of its previous meal. The subject is not averse to preying on humans, and it is recommended that personnel not enter the enclosure if SCP-811 has not fed in over 16 hours. No invasive medical procedure may be performed on SCP-811 outside of emergency situations in which such a procedure is required to save a subject's life. Minimally invasive procedures require review and unanimous approval by SCP-811's assigned medical team and the current project head. See Document 811-B for a list of substances that may be administered as medication to SCP-811. All requests by the subject are to be reviewed by both an overseeing animal enrichment specialist and at least one Level 3 personnel before approval, and the review should not take more than 48 hours unless exceptional circumstances dictate otherwise. While SCP-811 is not generally aggressive unless it feels hungry or threatened, all handling personnel are to be cautioned that it is still an opportunistic ambush predator, and safety precautions must still be taken to avoid injury or infection.
So this is like, the perfect example of a Euclid SCP. It's not super dangerous, but you can't really, lower your guard with it. So that's why it's not safe, it's not a Keter, it's a Euclid.
All personnel entering the enclosure must wear full-body, non-organic biohazard suits and breath masks, and must be in groups of at least 2. No personnel are to enter the enclosure if they have open wounds or sores anywhere on their body. Those suffering from asthma or other respiratory-affecting conditions are prohibited from entering the enclosure without a signed note from a physician with Level 4 security clearance. As far as research indicates, SCP-811 cannot cause serious injury to anyone properly wearing their biohazard suit. Anyone who removes any part of their biohazard suit while still in the enclosure, for any reason at all, will still be subject to disciplinary action, up to and including reassignment to a project that would not be adversely affected by their status as an amputee. Description: SCP-811 is shaped similarly to a human female, with disproportionately long and thin limbs and a slightly bloated abdominal region. It is 171 centimeters tall and weighs just under 47 kilograms due to its strange physiology. See Addendum 811-2 for details. Its skin has slight abrasive properties and is a mottled green color that serves to camouflage it among the reeds in its natural habitat. Its sweat has been observed to act as a mild skin irritant. It has extremely oily black hair that has proven to be resistant to cleaning with conventional shampoos. See Addendum 811-1. It shows partial comprehension of human language consistent with case studies of feral children that had been abandoned at a few years old instead of as infants. The palmoplantar surfaces of SCP-811's skin constantly secrete a clear, green-tinted mucus with minor adhesive properties. This mucus does not appear to have any effect on SCP-811's own tissue, but any other organic matter that it comes into contact with begins to rapidly decompose through processes not fully understood, reducing the matter into a slightly viscous black liquid. SCP-811 can then absorb said liquid through its skin and directly into its circulatory system. Tests have shown that SCP-811's entire circulatory system is filled with liquefied decaying matter. Biopsies taken from SCP-811 has shown the presence of anaerobic bacteria in all examined cells, which, due to the apparent lack of anything resembling functional red blood cells in the subject, are currently presumed to be what SCP-811 uses to metabolize the chemicals in its circulatory system. SCP-811 does not defecate or otherwise produce feces in the traditional sense, and entirely lacks a small or large intestine. Instead, cellular waste and substances SCP-811 is unable to metabolize collect in what is, anatomically speaking, its stomach. Within the stomach, enzymes and bacterial flora cause it to congeal into a grainy, tar-like substance that SCP-811 periodically voids by voluntary projectile regurgitation, a mechanism which it uses to hunt. It preferentially aims at the face or at any perceived open wounds on its target, then waits for the target to die of either immediate asphyxiation by blockage of the mouth and nose, or in a few days of multi-systematic failure resulting from aggressive bacterial infection. SCP-811's teeth did not seem to have any abnormal resistance to decay resulting from chronic exposure to the compounds and microflora in its waste. See Addendum 811-1. Prognosis for personnel who have had contact with SCP-811's waste through mucous membrane or open wound is good if broad-spectrum antibiotic therapy is begun in the first 3 hours, but then rapidly declines. Personnel who are D-Class or have gone 12 hours without getting treatment may request termination. Addendum 811-1. To date, SCP-811 has requested regular delivery of bovine prey, denied. That crocodilians be removed from its prey animal rotation, approved. The water be stocked with a variety of fish species from its native, denied. 1 hairbrush made from 100% synthetic materials, approved. For 1 D-Class personnel to every other day come in with a basin and shower head to wash and condition its hair, approved. It has been noted that standard strength hair shampoos do not adequately clean away the excessive oil in SCP-811's hair, and the use of a formula with a higher proportion of stronger surfactants has been authorized. To be addressed by a 2-syllable name that has been translated as AE, SCP-811 being illiterate and thus not capable of choosing a spelling for itself, approved. Side note, due to SCP-811's difficulty with language, it has been deemed acceptable to use its chosen name when directly speaking to it for the purpose of streamlining meaningful conversation. Relief from its chronic tooth pain, approved. Request was initially denied until a safe and effective method of administering general anesthesia to SCP-811 was discovered and a dental surgery plan devised. Tooth number 47, FTI, 2-digit rotation, removed to test method and adjust for unpredicted special aftercare requirements. Remainder of SCP-811's teeth removed and overdenture implants installed in a second operation. SCP-811 supplied with complete dentures to be repaired as needed. 1 turtle in a hazmat suit for non-dietary purposes, denied. Turtles accordingly removed from prey animal rotation. Possibility of placing a small turtle habitat in the observation area outside SCP-811's enclosure for enrichment under consideration.
Okay, Propaganda has requested SCP-666, which I do not know what that is, but if there's a YouTube vid on it, we're gonna find out. The Spirit Lodge. Oh, here we go. Oh, what up, Karen? Welcome. Just while watching SCP videos, just pick a number between 1 and 5,000. Actually, you could probably go between 1 and 6,000. I think it goes up that high, and we're just gonna listen to that story.
Hello there, and welcome back to another installment of SCP Readings with your reader here, Gmodon. Today we're looking at SCP-666. There's a link down in the description for you to follow along as I read out loud. SCP-666 is a medium-sized Tibetan yurt made of tied wooden branches and covered in yak leather.
No, you didn't miss anything. We're just getting started.
The interior ceiling is 2.44 meters or 8 feet high, and the base of the yurt is 9.14 meters or 30 feet wide. The hut is circular in shape. The interior of the yurt appears to be as crude as the outside to the majority of observers, with a dirt floor. The branches that make up the yurt frame are wrapped in rabbit fur and tied with yak leather thongs. Periodically, SCP-666 will change its location within the confinement area. This will only happen when not under direct observation, but remote viewing gives the impression of an entity inside the structure, lifting it wholly and moving it to its new position. To date, it has not made any attempt to escape confinement. SCP-666 was discovered in 1973 by SCP operatives searching the mountain regions on reports of several missing persons having returned from the area, giving similar explanations. Seeking shelter during harsh weather, the individuals would happen upon SCP-666 by seeming...
Was the light hitting me weird? What do you want to see my neck for, weirdo? Be your own SCP.
happenstance. Having gone out in similar conditions, the exploration team also were able to discover the yurt. Of the 3 operatives present, 2 experienced no ill effects. The third entered a stupor, experiencing vivid hallucinations and muttering incoherently to himself. Upon retrieval of the team, the yurt was recovered and taken to nearby Site 73 for further investigation. When an individual with no history of significant addictions enters the yurt remains dormant and seems to have no ill effects. Class D personnel without a history of alcohol or narcotics abuse were able to sit inside the yurt for days at a time if provided proper nourishment, but did report a greater intensity in their dreams. Individuals who have a history of substance abuse, however, will experience a hallucinogenic effect when inside the structure. In all instances, the subjects report being in a location either from their memories or a corollary thereof, specifically a spot where their addiction was at its most intense. Thus far, there have been reports of a nightclub bathroom, a 1973 Volkswagen Vanagon, a filthy alleyway, the redacted casino in Las Vegas, etc. One subject reported finding himself in a dirty apartment with a prostitute named Chloe, with whom he frequently indulged in narcotics abuse. Another reported being in his bathroom with a computer setup significantly more intricate than he owned before his arrest for distribution of child pornography. During these hallucinations, subjects report that they are confronted by an individual, referred to as SCP-666-1. Descriptions of SCP-666-1 vary wildly from person to person, with no commonality to race, gender, or appearance beyond being typical for the surroundings. SCP-666-1 will indulge the subject in their personal addictions, although at the start they will have a passive-aggressive attitude. As time progresses, the subject is encouraged to indulge further, while simultaneously being encouraged to stop. Should the subject show remorse or a strong desire to give up their addiction, SCP-666-1 will slowly adopt a more genuinely friendly tone and continue with the temptation with discouragement hallucinations. Approximately 94% of subjects who have gone through this form of hallucination to their end have been diagnosed as near complete removal of psychological addictions, though physical symptoms will persist through a natural withdrawal cycle. If the subject gives in to SCP-666-1's temptations, the entity becomes increasingly hostile. There is no set timetable nor degree of indulgence, but if left unchecked, SCP-666-1 will invariably begin assaulting the subject and forcing their vice upon them to levels of extreme overdose.
Hey, are you scared, Prop? You're the one who picked it. 666. Next time, pick a happier number.
If the subject is not forcibly removed from SCP-666 during this period, they will die. Cause of death is typical of their addiction, where an alcoholic will suffer extreme kidney or liver failure, a cocaine user will develop cardiac dysrhythmia, a subject addicted to video games or television will suffer extreme muscle atrophy and health issues associated with sedentary lifestyle, etc. Today, there has been no clear connection between who will and will not succumb to SCP-666-1. The working hypothesis is that it is simply a matter of the individual's willpower and conviction. All attempts to directly interview SCP-666-1 have failed, with the entity either redirecting the conversation or bluntly refusing to answer. The only statement that reveals anything to its nature was a single instance of, "We're not important here, this is all about you." This indicates that there are either multiple entities attached to SCP-666, or there are additional instances of SCP-666 in the world. Investigation is ongoing, and whenever similar stories arise, should another instance of SCP-666 be discovered, it is to be transferred immediately to Site 73. Addendum SCP-666-1. Nearly identical stories have recently arisen in remote areas of northern Canada describing a Wendigo hut. While unconfirmed, their similarities point to at least one additional instance of SCP-666 at large. So just to say, there is one last addendum in there that you can check out yourself. It's a conversation between one of the workers for SCP and one of the subjects that went into this hut. I actually find the idea of this SCP very, very interesting because it's basically something that will either help you or kill you. In a way, it's trying to help you by tempting you with these addictions that you have. Like, say for me, take for instance, I am heavily addicted to technology, the internet, who isn't these days, and video games. And I have a feeling if I went into that hut, I would get tempted with, you can have these video games if you want, or you can come and do other things. And I just think it's really kind of a very cool way to show how people really do go through rehabilitation with their addictions, that it's a world of temptation versus a world of recovery.
Yeah, so I like that one. That was cool. I like Gmo Dawn. She doesn't really do too many SCP videos anymore, but she used to be cool back in the day. So next up is SCP-118, requested by Karen. I have no idea what this SCP is going to be, but it's called the Nuclear Protist. So we'll do the shorter one.
Item SCP.
Nah, this is going to be a robot voice. Fuck this one. I'd rather have a human read it. Let's try this one. That's not even the right number. Alright, probably this one.
Item number SCP-118 Nuclear Protists. Object Class Euclid. Special Containment Procedures. Due to the number and distribution of SCP-118, containment of every specimen is impossible. Known SCP-118 red zones are to be closed off to all civilian marine vessels and divers under the guise of a military presence or other plausible cover story. Contacts in navies known to operate near SCP-118 red zones are to be utilized in order to minimize the passage of military vessels through the red zones. If any area within the red zone has a depth of less than 1,500 meters, the restriction is to be applied to aircraft as well. All human activity in surrounding yellow zones is to be monitored, and any non-military vessel or individuals approaching the red zone are to be turned away. In the red and yellow zones, Protocol Toxic Harvest is to be followed to ensure the removal of devices generated by SCP-118. Furthermore, Protocol Salvage is to be followed to ensure the early detection of any emerging red zones. Samples of SCP-118 can be stored using standard containment procedures for non-virulent anomalous microbes. Description: SCP-118 is a species of ocean-dwelling protista that is capable of assembling functional, self-initiating nuclear devices from materials present in the ocean water. While SCP-118 is unknown and hence has not been classified by the scientific community, specimens resemble protists of the phylum Euglenophyta, but have significantly increased levels of movement speed, nutrient storage capability, and resistance to alpha radiation. Specimens of SCP-118 have been found in all of the world's oceans and seas. When in a survivable saltwater environment, specimens of SCP-118 will seek out materials including but not limited to iron, silver, copper, carbon, TNT, and uranium isotopes. When SCP-118 has located a material of interest, the material is absorbed into the cell using a method that is dependent on the size of the material. Single atoms and molecules, mostly substances that are dissolved in the water, are passed through the cellular membrane through specialized protein pumps. Larger particles, smaller than the cell itself, are ingested through phagocytosis. Larger pieces will have particulates torn off through an unknown mechanism, which are then absorbed using the first two methods. This mining occurs even in solid and hard substances, such as metal ingots. Upon reaching a threshold of absorbed materials, specimens of SCP-118 will move towards an assembly area on the bottom of the body of the water they are present in, and will contribute to the assembly of a nuclear device. The nuclear devices assembled are gun-type fission devices, using uranium-235 as their fissile material. Observation of devices in the process of being assembled show that the process starts with the assembly of a metallic rounded cylindrical casing for the device, followed by the creation of two subcritical masses of uranium and the conventional explosives to propel them into each other. The mechanism by which SCP-118 enriches harvested uranium is currently unknown. Revised. See Addendum 4. The device is then finished with the assembly of a uranium-238 temper, where the two uranium masses will collide, and the assembly of a trigger mechanism. SCP-118 appears to assemble the necessary components by adding minuscule amounts of material to an initially tiny material seed. Different atoms and molecules can be added to the same component, and assembled components are not necessarily homogeneous. It is currently unknown whether SCP-118 builds on the seed atom by atom, or by adding very small sub-micrometer fragments. The mechanism by which SCP-118 attaches new material to the seed seamlessly is unknown. The assembly time depends on the size of the device being assembled, water conditions, and mineral availability, but observations suggest that 300 days for a medium-sized device can be considered average. Once a nuclear device is finished, SCP-118 will detonate the device by completing a circuit in the trigger mechanism. Around 90% of nuclear explosions recorded as a result of SCP-118 have yields in the 20 to 35 kiloton range, although yields as low as 4 kilotons and up to kilotons have been reported. Aside from cases involving human interference, failure to detonate has never been observed, as all nuclear devices recorded have either been detonated of their own accord or removed from the water prior to completion. Devices constructed by SCP-118 appear to be larger than man-made devices of a similar design and yield, presumably due to the neutral moderating effect of the water that separates the uranium masses throughout much of the device's construction. A given assembly area typically has between 1 and 3 devices in the process of assembly at any given time, although as many as 6 at a time have been observed. In zones where multiple devices are being simultaneously assembled, the devices are separated by enough distance to prevent the detonation of one from destroying or setting off the others. While the Foundation is unable to prevent civilians and other organizations from obtaining samples of SCP-118, its superficial similarity to existing species.
Alright, so this is basically just a fucking creature that assimilates like toxic materials in the ocean and turns it into nukes. Actually, it's a species. So there's a bunch of them. That's pretty freaky. But yeah, let me see. Karen says you have to leave for an hour pretty soon. Alright, we're gonna miss you. Thanks for contributing. Let me see. Propaganda. You say you have a song you've been playing on repeat. BRB by Mahalia. Yeah, man. Next time you go live, man, jam out on it, dude. Yeah, man, I'll be there. How many writers does the site have? I think it's pretty much infinite. Pretty much anyone can write an SCP. You could contribute. I could. The only thing, the only condition is that the story has to kick ass and like get enough votes. So I think the way it works is you write a story. It has to have all the it has to have a class, has to just be good and shit, and you submit it to the site, people thumb it up, and if it gets enough thumbs down, they'll just like replace it with someone else's story. But if it's good enough, you pretty much keep that number for all eternity. Let me see. I'm gonna be, I don't know if you're talking to me, am I gonna be around or wrapping up before then, or prop? But I'm gonna be around probably for a little bit. I have to get up early in the morning, so I'm not gonna stream too late. But if you guys want to hear a happy SCP, here's one that's actually pretty cool. Let me see, SCP-99. They're not all like bummers. This is actually a very uplifting SCP.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Miller, and the SCP we're going to be looking at today is SCP-999. Object Class: Safe. Special Containment Procedures. SCP-999 is allowed to freely roam the facility should it desire to, but otherwise must stay in its pen either between 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. for sleeping, or during emergency lockdowns for its own safety. Subject is not allowed out of its pen at night or off facility grounds at any time. Pen is to be kept clean, and food replaced twice daily. All personnel are allowed inside SCP-999's holding area, but only if they are not assigned to other tasks at the time, or if they are on a break. Subject is to be played with when bored, and spoken to in a calm, non-threatening tone. Description: SCP-999 appears to be a large, amorphous, gelatinous mass of translucent orange slime, weighing about 54 kilograms with a consistency similar to that of peanut butter. Subject's size and shape is easily malleable, and can change shape at will. Though when at rest, SCP-999 becomes a rounded, oblate dome, roughly 2 meters wide and 1 meter in height. The surface of SCP-999 consists of a thin, transparent membrane, similar to that of an animal cell, roughly 0.5 centimeters thick, and is highly elastic, allowing SCP-999 to flatten portions of its body up to 2 centimeters thin. This surface is also hydrophobic, although SCP-999 can willfully absorb liquids. See Addendum 999-A. The rest of SCP-999's body is filled with a viscous orange substance of unknown chemical makeup, though it
Hey, I'll be there, man.
is capable of digesting organic materials with ease. Subject's temperament is best described as playful and dog-like. When approached, SCP-999 will often react with overwhelming elation, slithering over to the nearest person and leaping upon them, hugging them with a pair of pseudopods while nuzzling the person's face with a third pseudopod, all the while emitting high-pitched gurgling and cooing noises. The surface of SCP-999 emits a pleasing odor that differs with whomever it is interacting with. Recorded scents include chocolate, fresh laundry, bacon, roses, and Play-Doh. Simply touching SCP-999's surface causes an immediate mild euphoria, which intensifies the longer one is exposed to SCP-999 and lasts long after separation from the creature. Subject's favorite activity is tickle wrestling, often by completely enveloping a person from the neck down and tickling them until asked to stop, though it does not always immediately comply with this request. Though injuries may occur, SCP-999 has never been found to purposefully attempt to harm others, and will immediately back away and contract its body into a quivering mound while gurgling in a similar manner to a whimpering dog, seemingly apologizing for hurting someone on accident. While the creature will interact with anyone, it seems to have a special interest in those who are unhappy or hurt in any way. Persons suffering from crippling depression or PTSD, for example, have reported having a far more positive outlook on life after multiple interactions with SCP-999.
Yeah, do what you gotta do, Karen. You're always welcome back.
The possibility of manufacturing antidepressants from SCP-999 slime is currently being discussed. In addition to its playful behavior, SCP-999 seems to love all animals, especially humans, refusing to eat any meat and even risking its own life to save others. On one occasion, leaping in front of a person to take a bullet fired at them. Subject's intellect is still up for debate. Though its behavior is infantile, it seems to understand human speech and most modern technology, including guns. SCP-999's diet consists entirely of candy and sweets, with M&Ms and Necco wafers being its favorites. Its eating methods are similar to those of an amoeba. Addendum. SCP-999-A. Reminder to all staff. SCP-999 is not to consume caffeinated soft drinks of any kind. Last week, someone gave SCP-999 a can of cola along with its usual breakfast. Not only was it literally bouncing off the walls for half an hour, the carbonation made SCP-999 visibly queasy afterwards, and it refused to move or eat the rest of the day. SCP-999 has thankfully recovered since, but the staff member in question has been reprimanded. Dr. Addendum. SCP-999-B. The following is a report from an experiment in which SCP-682 is exposed to SCP-999 in the hopes that it will curb the creature's homicidal rage.
Fuck, I want to listen to this, but you guys aren't going to understand unless you know who SCP-682 is. So really quick, we're going to go check out SCP-682. He's actually a popular one who gets referenced a lot. So, 682. Yes.
SCP-682 begins thrashing violently.
No, that's more of a story. That's not it. We need to go. I guess this will probably do.
Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know, my name is Agent Max Lombardi, Senior Agent Max Lombardi. For reasons I can't go into right now, Researcher Miller is still out of action. So I'm going to be taking this little, I don't know, what is it called? Classroom session. So, the skip we're going to be looking at today is an old favorite, SCP-682. Object Class Keter. Special Containment Procedures. SCP-682 must be destroyed as soon as possible. At this time, no means available to SCP teams are capable of destroying SCP-682, only able to cause massive physical damage. SCP-682 should be contained within a 5 meter by 5 meter by 5 meter chamber with a 25 centimeter reinforced acid-resistant steel plate lining all inside surfaces. The containment chamber should be filled with hydrochloric acid until SCP-682 is submerged and incapacitated. Any attempts of SCP-682 to move, speak, or containment breach should be reacted to quickly and with full force, as called for by the circumstances. Personnel are forbidden to speak to SCP-682 for fear of provoking a rage state. All unauthorized personnel attempting to communicate with SCP-682 will be restrained and removed by force.
Right now, he's just writing it from the perspective of whoever wrote the document. Each SCP has containment procedures that like the personnel have to read. So that those are the articles and documents that you're reading now. And I think the guy reading it now is Dr. Forgot his fucking name, but he's supposed to be like a doctor from the Foundation or researcher. But yeah, these are it's just containment procedures on how to, contain the anomaly. If you have any other questions, drop them.
Frequent attempts at containment breach, difficulty of containment and incapacitation, and high threat of Foundation exposure. SCP-682 is to be contained in sight. The Foundation will use the best of its resources to maintain all land within 50 kilometers clear of human development. It's kind of simple. Okay, let's move on. Description. SCP-682 is a large, vaguely reptile creature of unknown origin. It appears to be extremely intelligent and was observed to engage in complex communication with SCP-79 during their limited time of exposure. SCP-682 appears to have hatred of all life. Who doesn't? Which has been expressed in several interviews during containment. See Addendum 682-B.
So in short, basically, SCP-682 is a giant lizard that they can't kill, that hates everything, and tries to murder pretty much everyone it comes in contact with.
We're going to take a listen to that in a moment, so sit tight. SCP-682 has always been observed to have extremely high strength, speed, reflexes, though exact levels vary with its form. 682's physical body grows and changes very quickly, growing or decreasing in size as it consumes or sheds material. SCP-682 gains energy from anything it ingests, organic or inorganic. Digestion seems to be aided by a set of filtering gills inside of SCP-682's nostrils, which are able to remove usable matter from any liquid solution, enabling it to constantly regenerate from the acid it's contained in. SCP-682's regenerative capabilities and resilience are staggering, and SCP-682 has been seen moving and speaking, with its body 87% destroyed or rotted. In case of containment breach, SCP-682 is to be tracked and recaptured by all available mobile task forces, and no teams with fewer than 7 members are cleared to engage it. To date, attempted breaches have numbered at 17, while successful breaches have numbered at 6. Alright, let me get this little doohickey here. There we go. Okay, this is Addendum 682-B, portion of recorded transcript of... and play.
Now, why did you kill those fathers? If you don't talk now, we will remove you from this attempt and place you back into... Pardon? Speak up. Move the mic up closer. That microphone only has so much gain. Move closer to it.
His throat's messed up, man. Look at it. And he ain't talking. Disgusting.
Yeah. Pretty fucked up, right? Okay, so, this is Addendum 682-D. Breaches with 682. Listen, I'm gonna level with you here. You can see this right now. Pretty much all of it is redacted. It's just a big bundle of redacted. I'll give you the shortened version. Alright? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Handled by Agent Redacted. Personnel, insert number here. Killed. That's all you need to know. All you need to know. Unless anybody here knew somebody called D211. Anyone? I didn't.
And so this SCP has the most escape attempts and probably the most successful ones. It's probably killed the most D-class personnel. So it's probably like the most dangerous one. And just anybody familiar with SCPs, Like, we all know about 682 because it's like the strongest one, or one of the strongest ones. I wouldn't say he's the strongest, but he's definitely infamous.
I think so. Alright, let's move on. Addendum 682-E. Termination options. Log of events 682-E18. Dr. attempts to use SCP-409 on SCP-682. General, and Dr. observing. 0400 hours. Exposure. SCP-682 began to tear at the point of contact, causing massive trauma to the area. SCP-682 requests several times to know what it's been exposed to. 0800 hours. Crystallization begins, spreading much slower than normal. 1200 hours. SCP-682 shows signs of extreme pain and begins having seizures. 1300 hours. Crystallization stops at 62% conversion. Crystallized area explodes, causing massive physical trauma to SCP-682. 1400 hours. SCP-682 recovers from exposure. Despite the loss of all limbs and organs, SCP-682 begins regeneration, stating that it will attempt to kill and consume all staff involved in Event 682-E18. SCP-682 appears to now be immune to SCP-409. The use of other SCP items to terminate SCP-682 must now be first tested on samples of 682 before full-scale testing. It's just common sense, people.
Yeah, so basically whenever they try to kill it, it ends up just growing immunities and developing immunities to whatever method they use to kill it. So this SCP is it's basically just a living nightmare.
In accordance with Dr.'s recommendations, see document 27B-6, Dr. and Dr. have requested permission to attempt the termination of SCP-682 using SCP-689. The request is currently pending approval from. It is also being suggested by Dr. Gears to use SCP-182 in an attempt to communicate with SCP-682. SCP-182 has expressed reluctance and refuses to enter the containment chamber of SCP-682, if at all possible. 182's got a real good head on his shoulders. Trust me. You ask me, stick it in a spaceship, jettison it into space, make sure it doesn't hit the sun. You hear that? Make sure it doesn't hit the sun. Alright. Well, folks, it's been a pleasure. Me and my buddy Barnes got a game of poker going. Who's game? Come on. Come on. This guy right here.
Oh man, I love that guy. I love that guy's reading. That hardcore, that really rough East Coast accent. I'm trying to figure out who the fuck is SCP-182? The writer? I'm a little curious. But yeah, let's finish 999. So basically, back to 999. They introduced 999 as 682. And this is what happened.
SCP-999 is released into SCP-682's containment area. SCP-999 immediately slithers towards SCP-682. SCP-999 moves in front of SCP-682, jumping up and down in a dog-like manner while calling out in a high-pitched squealing noise. SCP-682 immediately steps on SCP-999, completely flattening SCP-999. Observers were about to abort the experiment when SCP-682 started talking again. SCP-999 can be seen crawling up from between SCP-682's toes, up along its side and around its neck, where it clings on and begins gently nuzzling with its pseudopod. A wide grin slowly spreads across SCP-682's face. SCP-682 repeats the word happy for several minutes, laughing occasionally before escalating into non-stop laughter. As laughter continues, SCP-682 rolls around on its back, slamming its tail upon the floor with dangerous force. SCP-682 and SCP-999 continue the tickle fight until SCP-682 finally wears down and appears to fall asleep with what would appear to be a smile on its face. After 15 minutes with no activity, 2 D-Class personnel enter the room to retrieve SCP-999. When SCP-999 is removed, SCP-682 immediately wakes up and unleashes an unidentifiable wave of energy from its body, all the while laughing manically. All persons within the wave's range collapse into crippling fits of laughter, allowing SCP-682 to escape and slaughter all in its path. Meanwhile, SCP-999 quickly rescues as many persons as it can, taking them to a safe place to recover from SCP-682's laughter wave, while agents suppress and recontain SCP-682. Despite the tragedy that SCP-682 had brought upon the facility, SCP-999 has not shown any fear towards the creature, and in fact has made gestures suggesting it wants to play with SCP-682 again. 682, however, has stated that feculent little can't even die.
Memo from Dr. While the test was unsuccessful and ended in tragedy, that had to be the funniest thing I have ever seen. I never thought I'd see the day when I would regard SCP-682 as cute. Please send me a copy of the security tapes as soon as possible. I'm just going to end this lecture with a piece of advice. Don't try and use 999 as some kind of therapy. It doesn't work, and you just end up getting banned from its pen. It happened to my friend. Turns out something that eats M&Ms and Necco wafers doesn't really taste that good when it's coming in, or feel that good when it's coming out. I know. Too much information. Sorry, it's been a long week. Anyway, thank you for listening, if indeed you still are, and you are all dismissed. Goodbye. I would like to give a
Begin official recording for SCP-053, also known as the Young Girl. Object class is defined as Euclid. SCP-053 appears to be a small 3-year-old girl. She is capable of basic speech and appears to be slightly above average in mental development. She has a generally pleasant personality and rarely seems upset, becoming agitated only in the presence of groups of people. Any and all humans over the age of 3 who make eye contact with, physically touch, or remain around SCP-053 for longer than 10 minutes will rapidly become irrational, paranoid, and homicidal. Most, if not all, of these feelings will be directed at SCP-053, and afflicted subjects will attempt to kill SCP-053 after first killing or driving off all humans visible to them. Those attempting to kill SCP-053 will suffer massive heart attacks or seizures and die seconds after doing any physical damage to SCP-053.
So in case you guys didn't catch that, basically, this is an SCP you can't look at, because if you look at her, you'll break out into an irrational homicidal rage and try to kill her. However,
SCP-053 will regenerate almost instantaneously from any wound, regardless of severity. SCP-053 appears wholly ignorant of these effects, and ignores any and all subjects affected. When questioned about this effect, SCP-053 is incapable of response.
Yeah, so basically, if you look at her, you break into a homicidal rage, try to kill her, but you won't be able to. You basically just kill yourself. I do one more, and we'll wrap it up. Let me see. That's SCP. Red light. This one's pretty fucked up.
SCP-3001. Red Reality. What does it mean to be truly alone? You can be alone in a room, in a building, on an island, or on the moon. Or you can be alone in your own mind. But we all...
YouTube Premium is cool if you can afford it. This is the trial version for me. I did not pay shit for my premium, and they're probably going to take it away soon. But I'm starting a new job tomorrow, and so if that goes well, I'll probably keep premium. But I mean, I recommend it if you got like the extra cash. That way you don't have to deal with the lame ass commercials.
Live in a world filled with people. SCP-3001, on the other hand, shows us an example of an individual that is truly and utterly alone, which is a unique case of science fiction, and yet it also manages to be surprisingly grounded in reality. SCP-3001 is not a happy story, but it's also an incomplete one, which leaves us with a sense of hope. The bulk of 3001 takes the form of transcribed logs, so I would suggest reading through it all yourself, but I'll try to strike a balance between summarizing and reading them.
This is one of the SCPs that probably horrified me the most. There's probably only like 3 or 4 SCPs that like kind of struck the horror of fucking God into me, and this is probably one of them.
To put it simply, SCP-3001 is a non-dimension, accessible through the creation of a specific type of flawed wormhole. Basically, it is a space between dimensions that really shouldn't exist, but was discovered by the SCP Foundation accidentally. It is believed to extend infinitely in all directions, but possesses no matter of any kind. The non-dimension also has an extremely low Hume level, which is a degree of measurement used by the Foundation to measure the strength or amount of reality in a given area. In other words, our baseline reality has a given level of Hume that we're accustomed to, but certain factors, such as other dimensions or reality benders, can change that level of Hume as things become more or less real, so to speak. What a very low Hume level means for 3001 is that matter that would be located inside the non-dimension decays at an extremely slow rate, and organisms could still function despite taking damage that would normally kill them, up to a certain point. The downside of this, however, is that Hume fields tend to even out, and so prolonged exposure to 3001 will cause an organism's Hume level to drop until they begin to disintegrate. 3001 was discovered in 2000, while Dr. Robert Scranton and his wife, Dr. Anna Lang, were working on a device that would stabilize reality by manipulating Hume levels. Unexpected seismic activity at the site damaged several experimental reality stabilizers, creating one of those specific wormholes, which proceeded to pull Robert into the non-dimension before closing. We are then presented with a large number of logs, transcribed from audio recordings made by Robert. For the first 8 days of Robert being inside 3001, he attempts to navigate the non-dimension to find a way out while going through periods of panic, confusion, and anger. He eventually makes his way over to a control panel that had gone through the wormhole with him, although he doesn't realize at first that it is actively recording. He makes several recordings, presumably for his own benefit, as he states his name and date of birth, mentions his favorite color is blue, and his favorite song is Living on a Prayer, and that he loves his wife, Anna. Before long, he notices a flashing light on the control panel, and realizes that the machine is working and recording. He panics and states his name again, asking if anyone can hear him, saying he doesn't know where he is. He's not sure at all how the machine is working, but he's pretty sure that no one can hear him. He also notes how hungry and thirsty he is, saying that he should have died of dehydration by now, an effect of the low Hume level, although it will take Robert some time to realize this. After fiddling with the machine some more, he locates the controls, causing the machine to speak, telling him he's been here for 2 weeks, 3 days, 7 hours, and 58 minutes. Another week goes by, with Robert realizing now that it doesn't seem like he'll die here due to hunger or thirst, and he wonders if by some miracle he'll find his way out of here. 5 weeks go by with Robert barely recording anything, but he comes back and says that he's been trying to learn about this place he's in, referring to it as his prison and his kingdom. He manages to maintain his professionalism, recording a log saying that he's going to document this place as an SCP to maybe help someone else in the future that gets stuck in here. A few days later, he records a log as if it were a standard SCP document about the non-dimension, but we can see the cracks in his mental state beginning to show. The only light source in the entire non-dimension is a small red light on the control panel, so he's been using that as a marker for his explorations. He also notes that he's felt an itch or a tingle across his head recently, but only if he concentrates on it. He next realizes that although he's thought he's been walking on flat ground this whole time, there really shouldn't be anything to walk on in this place, and now he notes that it's felt more like he's been swimming through something that's been applying pressure, like a thick black gel. He now realizes that by concentrating, he can actually move vertically as well as horizontally, again using the red light as his reference point, or as he calls it, Little Red. He understands a bit more about the location he's in now, knowing that it was caused by a problem with the reality stabilizer. He does some math, and apparently figures out how low the Hume level of this non-dimension is, but is not sure of the effects of that, as he's mostly worked with above-average Hume levels. At this point, he really begins talking to the red light directly, as if it were a person. He seems to be speaking to it, and imagines responses coming back from it, but this is pretty understandable, given the situation. Robert's scientific mind allows him to keep focus, however, as he continues to perform calculations to help him understand 3001. He learns that the reality stabilizer that sent him and the control panel here cranked up their Hume levels to a few times normal level, meaning that it will take longer for them to equalize with 3001 and disintegrate. By his calculations, he has about 3 years or so before he's gone, and he believes he'll have something figured out by then. The tingling feeling he's had is his Hume level starting to diffuse. Robert's next log reads, "Hey, Red. I'm gonna have to go for a bit. I want to test something, and you can't come with me. I'm sorry. No, Red, I'm really sorry. I want you to come, I do, but if we're together, the diffusion will increase faster. We both need as much time as possible. I need to figure this place out more, and you need to make sure you keep all that info in your head. Red, come on. You'll be fine, Red. I know you will. You're tough. A lot tougher than me. It'll only be for a bit, Red, but I need to see if I can find a way to keep us alive a bit longer. Maybe even get us out of here. If I can contain enough field, I can maybe even get us out. No, I'm not sure, but I need to find out. Red, we're talking about possibly escaping, okay? Yeah, it's a gap. A gap should have an end, like the walls of a canyon, understand? I need to find a wall, and then I can... I'm sorry, Red. I hope we're still friends when I come back. I'm going now. I'll see you soon. The control panel didn't record anything for nearly 4 full months, when suddenly Robert returned, far less hopeful than when he left. He says that this place is hell, and it goes on forever. He traveled in a single direction for 2 months before turning around. He then wonders if he let himself fall down long enough, would he eventually hit a bottom? More than 4 months go by before Robert returns again, saying there is no bottom either. This is the point where Robert's mental state really begins to deteriorate, as he asks Red if he's ever been married, or had kids, begging Red to talk to him. He suddenly realizes that his picture of Anna is fading due to the Hume levels, and he panics, begging Anna not to go, and asking Red to go get help. Robert loses coherency at this point, as months go by with him only sobbing, screaming, and mumbling. It has now been roughly 2 years and 9 months since Robert entered SCP-3001. Robert finally manages to return and make another recording, although his voice is now distorted due to both his own and the control panel's Hume levels dropping. He says that he can't feel his legs anymore, and he's not even sure if he's real anymore, but he knows he doesn't want to die yet. He says he went in a straight diagonal line for 6 months, and fell down for 8 months, but still found no end. He tells Red that he and Anna were planning to name their kid Lucy. His hand begins to break apart, resembling a spider web, but he still retains his knowledge of science, continuing to do calculations on 3001. Unfortunately, his body is beginning to seriously disintegrate, as he claims his hands are moving through each other, and he pulls his thumb off. He says he can go through himself, feeling both warm and cold, and also loses a kidney, but pleads to let him keep just his heart. 5 years have passed now, with Robert and the control panel still somehow held together, but finally the red light begins to fade.
5 fucking years in that place, man.
9 months go by, and Red seems to make a return. Robert attempted to kill himself over 220 times, but none of them worked. He can't see his body due to the darkness, but speculates that he at least has 1 foot left, a few leg muscles, maybe a lung, and a heart. He claims that this non-dimension is now getting smaller, as there now seems to be a visible border that is getting brighter. The light from this border allows Robert to see himself, and he says there's so much gone, although the control panel seems to be patient about the collapsing border, which is acting more like waves, and also begins to understand what we already know about 3001 being a non-dimension between 2 realities, saying that it's a dead end. Robert says that these waves are from a parallel reality, and they're pushing on him and Red, gradually creating a new wormhole. The only problem is, he's not sure what will happen when that wormhole is created. Robert's body continues to break down as blood leaks from him, and he finds himself constantly vomiting, despite not having eaten anything for years, nor having a stomach to hold anything. He says that he's not ready to go back yet, as he's pretty much a floating pile of organs kept functional by 3001. He has to stay away from the waves to prevent him from going through a wormhole and dying, but unfortunately the control panel will eventually go through. Robert says that he has 5 more years in 3001, during which he will slowly restabilize, giving him 5 years to figure out how to get out. But he'll have to stay in here without his metal companion. A humming pulse begins growing louder in the background, and Robert breaks down in hysterics again, becoming almost incomprehensible as he begs both Red and Anna for support, wanting to hold her hand and telling her he lost his ring. 5 years, 11 months, and 21 days after an incident sent Dr. Robert Scranton into a non-dimension, the stabilizer control panel, thought lost, suddenly reappeared in the testing facility. Dr. Anna Lang, overseeing the testing, went to investigate the panel, horrified at finding it covered in blood, bile, viscera, and hair, identifying the hair color as belonging to Robert. A hand fell off of the panel, along with a wedding ring, and Anna accessed the first audio log, hearing her husband's voice for the first time in nearly 6 years. She proceeds to faint from shock. This is where the story of SCP-3001 leaves off, ultimately unfinished and leaving Robert's final fate to your imagination. According to the author, although much of Robert went back to our reality along with the control panel, there is still some of him in 3001, and it's quite possible he's still functioning. Those aren't the only options, as some tales have shown, but I think it's good a story like this is left so open to the reader. The concept of being isolated from all human contact is certainly not a new one in fiction, but it's rarely taken to this degree. Not only was Robert left stranded with only a machine to talk to, he was left in near total darkness and had no way of ending his life. Chances are we've all felt emotions of loneliness and isolation at one point or another, but at least we're not stuck in the red reality.
Yeah, thank God for that. Alright, so I'm going to wrap it up. It was SCP-3001, the red reality, which is basically, the red light was just an LED light that he kind of befriended in a insane kind of way, like Tom Hanks did in that movie with the soccer ball. I forgot what the fuck what it was called. And him and Wilson. So basically the red LED light was this guy's Wilson. So it's pretty fucked up, but yeah, there's worse ones than this, trust me. I highly recommend you guys all subscribe to the SCP channels and shit, and check out stories for yourself. Go to the SCP wiki, and yeah. Alright, wrapping it up. Have a good one.